Hello, I'm Christina Henderson, Executive Director of the Montana High Tech Business Alliance. Welcome to this discussion on attracting and retaining great talent with Kendall Clifton Short. This event is part of a monthly Lunch and Learn series on people and culture, hosted by the Montana High Tech Business Alliance and Within People. You can find details of future sessions at mthightech.org/events. Our presenter today, Kendall Clifton Short, is a partner at the global firm Within People and is based in Bozeman. Today's discussion with participants will not be recorded to allow you to talk freely. I would now like to turn over the floor to Kendall Clifton Short to get us started.
Just hear about a little bit about who you are and what specifically you're looking for out of this conversation. Before I pass the floor over, if you like, maybe I'll just position us properly. So really this conversation is about how do we, can you see my screen, the right screen, Emily? How do we attract and nurture amazing talent in a competitive job market, and for most of us within a high cost of living town? So that's really the conversation that most of us in this community are grappling with, if we're really honest. And then we have here today me and Emily from Within People. We are a partnership, a global partnership. We work on the west coast of the US. We also work in the UK, and we also work in South Africa. So we have a diverse cultural perspective on things as well. And this conversation is part of the conversations that we love, helping leaders navigate. So if this is really what we're here to talk about, how do we attract and retain great talent? I guess I'd just love for all of you to say hi. What's brought you to this conversation, and what's one question that you would love us to explore together today? And in the interest of keeping the conversation moving, I might like go around my Zoom screen and invite you to talk so that you're not all standing here thinking, should I go next? Chris, do you want to jump in first? Defensive to live, certainly in Bozeman, but in other places in Montana as well. We've got less people in the workforce because of COVID, lots of women. So I do have a few stats, but like lots of women are stepping out of the workforce. We have lots of people who had lower wage jobs choosing to step out of the employment market because the money they were earning is being supplemented by unemployment insurance. We have massive demographic shifts happening across the country in terms of people moving into Bozeman, driving up the housing market, and yet still working for people out of state. And to Stephanie's point, people who live in Bozeman having to leave Bozeman so that they can keep working in Bozeman because there's a really big mismatch. And Bozeman's one, obviously, like microcosm, but that I can speak more knowledgeably about, but at the same time, these similar trends we're seeing across Montana as well. It's not only Bozeman. So if we perhaps I'll just share a couple more stats if that is interesting or helpful. We've got obviously the COVID piece and the remoteness happening. So with 12% of the workforce working remotely before COVID, we're anticipating, the research is suggesting that at least 20% are going to continue working remotely full-time after the pandemic, with another third doing it part-time. And we're also hearing, obviously, in the news of like, well, before, there's this big debate. Well, if you worked in California and you earn a Californian salary and you've chosen to go and live somewhere else, is that going to, perhaps we won't pay you as much, but is that really equitable? And so we've got all of these different levers, or I guess pressures, coming together in this really interesting space. We've got a whole new conversation about Black Lives Matter that wasn't, it was a conversation, of course, but it wasn't necessarily a conversation that everybody was being forced to have. And certainly in Montana, which is one of the whitest places I've ever lived, it wasn't a conversation that we felt like we needed to have. And there's some new urgency and pressure that's adding to the job market and adding to people's desire to have and benefit from a more diverse workplace. But it really raises the question, is our workplace even a place where diverse people would want to come and work? But we certainly have new things that our employees want us to be addressing as employers and as leaders. We've also got, which is always happening, but it's interesting to be sort of unpack what it's happening. We've got different generations in some businesses, especially larger businesses, all motivated by radically different things and all looking for quite different things out of their place of employment. And so how do we sort of create an environment, create a culture where all of that can come together and coalesce in a really productive, profit-driven, and yet also way that it drives belonging and makes this a place people can see themselves into the future? How do we do that really well? AI is not so particularly relevant to this conversation, but it is shaping the nature of the workforce. And, there's lots of fear, obviously, about, well, will I still have a job? And then there's also this really interesting question, which is how do we use humans to inject humanity into our AI in a really exciting way? Slightly off topic. So if that's kind of they're all the things in the field, if you like, I thought it'd be helpful for us to start with just like, okay, here's within people's approach to solving this problem. It's not all of the answers, of course, because it requires us all to go and do some work, but it is the really great way to start thinking about solving this talent and retention problem. So for us, and of course I'm not of course, because some of you don't know this, but we really work at the intersection of brand, culture, and leadership. And so how do we create cultures of belonging and inclusion where people can come and unlock all of the creative gifts that they have to offer so that they can help us grow and solve the problems that are meaningful for our problem to be solving? And how can they really... So it's our job as leaders to create an environment where they want to come and are able to unleash that. And then that is the key piece of obviously them wanting to stay. So when we start to think about that in the context of attracting and retaining people at its very simplest form, this is how we think about it. The very first question that I would normally ask people is, why would people come and work for you? And it's amazing to me that so many people can't actually answer that question. And of course, it's not simple, and it's like multifaceted and complex, but often it's like pay. And so pay's great, but there gets to a point where we can't keep paying people more, no matter how much the cost of living is increasing, because we don't have the ability to do that, or we can't make a profit if we are continuing to do that. Some companies can, and I was speaking to a founding director of a big tech company in town last week, and she was saying, yeah, we just hired an ops manager. I ended up paying her twice what I was planning to, because she was great and she could ask for that and they could afford it. But not all of us have that luxury. And not everybody is only driven by pay. And I'll unpack that in a little bit more. So get clear on why you is a big, complex question, I guess, that we can dive into more. But that's really the first place to start. Why would someone come and work for you as opposed to somebody else? What is it that they can get and what you can offer them that's going to be attractive, especially in a hyper-competitive market? And then the second piece of the formula, if you like, is how do we then live up to delivering that? So what is the promise we're making people? And then how do we know that we are actually delivering on that promise? So if that's at its simplest form, the conversation that I want to have today, I think the next piece that's really that really frames it all is when we take everything that's happening in the workforce, the different generations, the intersectionality of different world events that are all coming together, at its core, this is actually what people from across all of those generations want from work. They want there to be some flexibility in it for them, and whether that means they can have their kids in the background, or they can leave early, or they can work from home, or whether that means they can choose their own shift. Flexibility can look radically different to radically different people, even for manufacturing clients. Like, so we have shifts and we run 24 hours. It's not possible for people just to show up to work when they want. Flexibility is still possible in an environment like that when we start to think creatively about it. People also want to feel connected to the people that they're working with. And in COVID, obviously, that's been that need has both been amplified, and for some organizations, delivering on that promise has been more challenging. But it's not impossible, even if you don't work all together, even if you have like 100% remote workforce, and you always have, there's still ways that you can bring people together that drive belonging, and prioritize that as a key piece of the, like, how do we unlock creativity in people? We have them feeling connected to their co-workers, feeling connected to the mission of the business, feeling connected to the way that we all show up and do our work together. They also want to be rewarded, which is, of course, where the pay piece comes in. But there's so many other aspects of feeling rewarded too. So it can be recognition. It could be the opportunity to go and pursue something that they are particularly jazzed about in the context of the business. It could be some organizations choose to offer them like a portion of the business. Like, there's lots of different ways we can reimagine what reward looks like. And research suggests that especially millennials, younger people coming into the workforce, would like 80% would happily take a pay cut if there were other things like the culture of the organization, that, or the purpose or mission of impact of the business, that really felt aligned with what impact they wanted to have in their life. So pay is important, and we have to be able to feed our families and pay our mortgages or pay our rent. And at the same time, there's lots of other ways that people are really open to being rewarded too. And then last of all, people want to feel like they're growing. They want to be able to see that there's somewhere that they can go in the business. And this speaks to some of the challenge that some of you have seen. So how do we paint the picture of what committing to growing with the company as the company grows? How do we paint that picture really well? So, and then I guess, so if that's how we might start to reimagine what we have to offer as an organization, the next layer of that, and this is perhaps where we want to have our conversation today, the next layer of that is what we call like promises over perks. So perks is very much like pre-COVID, come and work for us, we give you free lunch, we give you a ping pong table, there's sleeping pods, life's great. And that is great. I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm also saying like like if that's why people had gone to work for organizations and those things were no longer available because we were all working from home, what is it that's keeping me rooted into this company as opposed to going somewhere else? So when we start saying, well, which perks do we want to keep and are really serving our people, and what other promises might we start to make as a way of helping people step into what they want the experience of work to be, rather than us saying, well, you should have free lunch. Well, maybe I'm, have dietary restrictions and I can't eat the free lunch anyway. Then there's a real like reciprocity that's starting to happen, and it's a two-way engagement as opposed to like, well, this is what my employer has promised, and so do I like that or do I not? And more young people, obviously, they want to feel that autonomy of over being able to drive some of the conversation about what work is for them and what work looks like for them. And this is a place that we can do that. So that's sort of like the next layer down, but at the highest context level, and in probably the most useful place for us to have our conversation today is here. So how do we understand what it is that we as an organization are offering to people? And then, of course, how do we then go out and share that? What's the story that we tell around that so that they pick us as opposed to other people? And of course, whatever we're then promising out in the recruitment space is then what we need to be able to deliver on, which is where the like and how we're living up to that promise comes in, because otherwise there's a disconnect between what they thought they were getting and what they have been experiencing, and our retention strategy goes down the toilet. So that was a really quick drive-by in terms of like our philosophy of how we go about understanding this problem and solving it. I'm really curious, like, how did this land for people? What questions have now emerged? Where might this fit? Where is something in here feel like it might apply, or what new questions come up when I put this on the table, as it were? So Christina, I'm not sure if you've really enjoyed the conversation, and there's some obviously great ways and innovative approaches that people are already tackling this conversation. I'm excited to keep it going and hear from all the value that you can each offer each other as well. And as our opinions on things. But yeah, over to you, Christina.
Oh, thank you again, Kendall, and thank you to our audience for joining us. A reminder, the resource materials from today's session, those mentioned by Kendall and also those shared in the chat, we will email out to everyone who registered. We will continue meeting on the last Thursday of each month at noon. Join us for our next session on May 27th on growing fast and struggling to